So yesterday, Kat, our president CXO, talked a little bit about how her lens of looking through all of this stuff is Lego. And then in the afternoon, the client experience team talked about how their lens is all about romantic comedies. And that matters because the client experience organization is one of the big fundamental differences. But the other big fundamental difference is the product. And so that's what we wanted to focus this session today on primarily. We'll touch on all the sort of different angles, but that's the focus that we wanted. So my lens for looking at this stuff is a little bit more lowbrow. It's reality television. So I want to start off with taking us back to the beginning of reality television, or at least modern reality television. Everybody remember Paris Hilton? All right. So we're going to play a little game. I call it Degreed or Not. There's actually not that many people in here, so we can just do show of hands. Is this degreed or not? Degreed? Right? You all get an A. How about this one? This one? This one? This one? That's it. The point there is none of them are degreed. But if all you see is the content cards arranged in rows, there's not much of a difference. For us, and what I really want to get out of Mike and Michelle today especially, is some frameworks for thinking about how do we see beyond the cards, through the cards, what's behind the cards, but also what goes around the cards, because how these things work is really where the difference is. And I read this article in Wired last week, and this really clicked with me, because I have this conversation a lot, right? And what this guy was saying is that software programmers have opinions. They want you to complete tasks and do things in a certain way. And you can set up software to look like anything. So just because you have software that looks similar, sounds kind of similar, what you really need to look at is how these things work, because that's where the differences really are. Right? So just to close out the reality TV metaphor a little bit, Michelle and Mike are going to tell their stories. Any 90 Day fans, 90 Day Fiancé fans in here? Only 3, so I'm going to have to explain this a little bit. So 90 Day Fiancé is a show about Americans who bring foreigners over to the US, and they have 90 days to get a visa and decide whether or not they want to get married. And they have a whole ecosystem of spin-off shows because it's so popular and it's touched such a vein with America. And actually, it's a global phenomenon now. But they have other shows where people go to other countries. So as Nancy was saying yesterday, there's all different kinds of stories, but there's sort of 2 prototypes, right? There's the ones that end in a happy resolution where the hero overcomes his challenges, and then there's the cautionary tales. So in 90 Day Fiancé, there's Jenny and Sumit. Sumit's a 30-something-year-old Indian guy. Jenny's in her 60s, and she's moved over to India to live with him and to hopefully get married. And her parents are really not happy about this. Or sorry, his parents are really not happy about this. And they've actually been recurring characters, I think, for 3 or 4 seasons because they can't resolve this. But they persevere because of love. The other direction is a guy named Big Ed, who just can't seem to say the right thing, but he keeps trying. So he learns his lesson, makes a different mistake, keeps trying. He's about to get his own spin-off show. So I don't know what their stories are, but Mike and Michelle are going to share their cautionary tales and their inspirational stories of triumph. So I forget which one is first. Oh, sorry. So before we go to that, this is a masterclass. We really did want to actually make this legitimately useful for you all. Our goal is to help you to clarify the differences, the strengths, and the challenges of different systems so that we can see past the content cards and understand, A, how do we answer the questions that we all get from our colleagues about why do we need this other learning thing when we have this learning thing? You can do a better job of using the tools that you have if you know what they're good at and what they're bad at, right? Contractors don't use drills for everything. They don't use hammers for everything. And the last thing is, the more value you can get out of your systems by using them in their correct intended ways, the better. So without further ado, this one looks like it's Mike. So Mike, why don't you explain to us what's in your ecosystem and why?
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, happy to. I think if you were to rewind about 12 months, this graphic would look quite a bit different. And using Nancy Duarte's story model yesterday, I think you could say safely that we're still a little bit in that messy middle space. I think we haven't quite come to the happy conclusion yet, but we're well on our way. This is a sneak peek at AmerisourceBergen's ecosystem from a learning and talent perspective. And just to highlight a couple of the things on here. So you'll see that Degreed is really integral. It's that center component within our learning ecosystem. A couple of years ago, you would see several different LMSs, and they would all be sort of linked together through uses and processes. But you'll see here that everything is really focused around Degreed as that experience platform. We do have a learning management system. We use LearnUpon, so you see that just to the left of Degreed there. And that is still a very active system. We use LMS every day, and in some cases more than the LXP. And you'll see there that the AmerisourceBergen content, all of the things that we're developing and we're hosting and publishing go into our learning management system. But the learning management system has moved from being sort of the integral, the front and center system into just one of many sources of content and data. And so you see the content and courses and programs are coming from our LMS into our Degreed platform, along with other content from our external providers, as well as shared providers and shared content that other learners are sharing with each other or sharing with their teams. You'll see there on the left-hand side, the learning administrators. So we'll touch on this in a couple of slides, but our learning administrators actually are administering both systems. And in some cases, the same person is doing different tasks and setting up different types of programs, both in the LMS and the LXP. And down at the bottom left, you'll see some of our feeds into the system. So we're getting our people and our organizational data from Workday for our employee population. And then our identity management system is bringing in our contractor data. That's going through Degreed and then flowing back into LearnUpon so that we can create our assignment groups and push out our required training. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see that really the learners are only seeing that front end of that. They're interacting primarily with the Degreed platform. And so you see at the top that view assignments and transcripts. About a year ago, that would really be the only line, the only thing coming out of our learning system is a simple assignment and a transcript. But now you'll see that's being really exploded out, and there's a lot of other content, a lot of other processes flowing out. So course and skill alignment, searching and browsing of content, external learning, all being trapped or captured within that Degreed environment. And then also some of our talent processes that we're using the LXP for as well. And I know we'll get into this in a couple slides as well, but just to touch on them briefly, career pathing, development plans, obviously our skills, and data and analytics. And then coming soon, hopefully for us, there's a couple of key pilots around opportunity marketplaces. So all of this is being facilitated and enabled by our LXP, which really is kind of that central hub for our ecosystem.
Central hub, cool. All right, Michelle.
Yeah, so ours looks very different, and I actually summarized this down. We have quite a few various different systems, but really there's three main components: our LMS, our LXP, and then we have what we call Digital Campus, so I'll kind of touch on that in just a little bit. So back in 2005, we had 8 different LMSs, and being a highly regulated company, we have a lot of compliance training, a lot of certification management and things, and so we really needed a tool that would manage all of that for us and get us through the audits that we needed to get through. So we implemented a one learning management system, and so we used it for many, many years. We had all of our various content providers that we had contracts with that we could give our employees access to. But in early 2018, we went out to those users and we said, hey, what are your pain points from a learning and development perspective? And they told us many things, but really one of the main points that they made for us is that we don't know where to get to things. We don't even know what offerings are out there for us. And then we were like, gosh, the utilization is down in a lot of our content offerings. So that's when we implemented Degreed. And so that was, I think, early 2019. We wanted to bring in Degreed really quickly. So we really didn't take it through our full security process and global privacy process. So we were limited on how much functionality we could use within Degreed. So we also implemented what we call Digital Campus. And so that was going to be our gateway for all of our internal content, and then also showing and getting people to Degreed. So we went back out to the users and we said, okay, gosh, we've done all this work for you now, what do you think? And they still said, everything looks and acts differently. Sometimes we go to different browsers and we get pop-ups and dead ends and missing links. So they loved the functionality that they got in Degreed. They loved being able to do the learning pathways and things like that, but we still had work to do. And so That's why we're furthering, taking a look now, and I've actually learned a lot this week that's telling me, hey, our strategy for really, thinking digital campus needs to be our centralized gateway. I emailed our CLO last night and I said, I think we really need to take a better look, and we've since gone through the security process so that we can start utilizing more of the functionality in Degreed. And so now I'm really excited to partner more with, our Degreed folks and really see how we can make that our true, centralized gateway. So, that totally changes. I had a whole different spiel and I was going to talk more, but this is really, I've learned so much and really excited to see how we can, do what Mike's done and really make that our central hub.
Cool. So the lesson there is things change.
They do.
So let's dig in a little bit deeper, and we're going to save some time at the end for audience questions. So please start thinking about those as we get through this. But we've got 3 questions to just sort of get the gears turning, and then we're going to do. Danny's going to wrap up a bit. We're going to do an exercise together, and then we're going to come back for the Q&A. So let's go with Mike first. Mike, why did you invest in your LMS in the first place? Why did you invest in the LXP in the first place? What is the sort of intended purpose of those things for you?
Right. I think the short answer for both the LMS and the LXP is we had to. I think from the LMS side, we are, as Boeing is, we are in a regulatory environment. We have to maintain a compliance, a state of compliance with our processes. And so really the LMS is kind of the integral piece in our compliance training, our regulatory training. So when we have audits, when we have reporting coming out, that's all coming out of the LMS. And that really maintains our assignment structures and maintains our reporting. From the LXP side, though, we had to for a different reason. We were getting overwhelming feedback from our leaders and from our employees that we were very light on the development side within our learning and development. And so we had training opportunities, of course, through our legacy learning management systems, but we really were very light on the development side. And so our employee population was clamoring for career pathing opportunities and development opportunities. And we really didn't have great solutions to point them and let them sort of take the reins of their own career paths and their career journeys. And so that we were faced with a lot of this overwhelming input. And it really seemed to fit that both sides we could get with an LMS and an LXP ecosystem, we could maintain both sides. So we're covered from the regulatory and compliance standpoint. We're also giving people the opportunities and the development journeys that they need. So really those are kind of the 2 main focuses of our system. They both work together well.
Great, thank you. Michelle, same question.
Yeah, and very similarly, as I kind of spoke about with our LMS, it's predominantly used for our certification training, our mandatory and compliance training. There is some discretionary learning, and a lot of the discretionary learning that's there is because it's the system that, some of our learning administrators have always used. So, it's kind of their commonplace for them to go there. And when you start thinking about the LXP, it's really about that skills development. It's really, giving the development opportunities and really pulling everything together, aggregating it, and getting it in one place where everybody can access it and be able to develop those skills that we need to move forward.
So what I'm hearing is like a contrast between job readiness and development is a sort of big theme.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Question number 2, and let's try to be balanced about this, right? What are the biggest benefits and challenges of using both of these things, right? What do they help you do, and what do you stumble on that pushes you back to the other?
Yeah, starting with the challenges first, I think it is a different approach and a different model moving from an LMS only ecosystem into having the combination. I think one of the things that we hit that was a little bit of a challenge was our governance models and our processes had to change significantly. So we have learning administrators interacting and transacting in both systems. And although the systems are very closely integrated, the models for admin permissions and things like that are different. And so there was some change management we had to do from a governance and admin permissions perspective. And some things that they're able to do in the LMS, they may not be able to do in the LXP based on kind of key business decisions or system configuration. So that's one challenge we're still working through in that area. Another challenge is to get people to realize that the LXP is not an LMS. And so I think, there's a lot of demos that happen. I demo our systems very, very frequently. But to me, it's a worthwhile investment because if I can get people to realize the additional functionality and capability that we have through the LXP, then we can really accelerate our path. And then I think the other challenge that I would just bring out, and it's not a big challenge, but it does take some sort of user communication, is that we went from having a couple thousand courses within our LMS to now tens of thousands of learning opportunities within the LXP. And so I think in some cases you really have to kind of coach and guide your learners on how to browse and how to search and how to find the right opportunities. And then on the flip side, on the managers and learning admin side, how to build robust and good programs for their learners without overwhelming them with all the content. So it's kind of a good challenge to have, but it is one that we're working through. I think the benefits, though, is that we're not forcing an LMS to do what an LMS can't do. And so, the biggest benefit is usability in that experience. So we really try to lead with learner experience in mind. And we let the LMS do what it's good at. It's good at record keeping. It's good at hosting content. It's good at spitting out reports when we need it. And then the LXP, we're really able to lean on for that usability in that experience piece. And of course, the benefit of skill data now is tremendous. And we're just getting started and really tapping into that and bringing some of those insights out to our leaders and really generating a lot of excitement and momentum in that space.
Nice. So, Michelle, you'll notice that Mike worked in some of that cautionary tale storytelling that Nancy talked about yesterday.
He did.
Same question for you. What are the biggest benefits and challenges of these things for you?
Yeah, so I'm really going to start talking about LXP from a benefits perspective first, and it really gets down to that user experience. And my team's been utilizing user-centered design for quite some time, and really going out and asking questions. And what do you want? And what are the problems? What are your pain points? And that has so much improved that user experience. That's definitely one of the biggest benefits. We have so many, I'm going to call them opportunities. There's really only a couple of challenges from an LXP perspective, but opportunities. We have so much more opportunity to utilize the skills, assessments and really try to start, with data, right? Trying to start seeing some trends and things in how that more discretionary learning is improving our skills for our workforce. But one of our, I think, really a challenge with our LXP is our manufacturing workers, right? We have, it's over a third of our company are down in the manufacturing. They can't really have a mobile device, on the shop floor with them. So how do we get them motivated and excited to access, degree they can access it from their, their personal devices, or they can stay after and use a workstation. But what's going to motivate them to do that? And so I think that's one of our biggest challenges, but our Guillermo Miranda, our CLO, he's brought in a marketing and branding and user engagement team, and that's pretty recent. And so I'm really excited to work with them and see how we can really overcome some of those challenges. And when I think about our LMS, the benefits, it manages our certifications extremely well. That's because it's an on-premise tool and we just built it, right? We purchased something and then we just Boeingized it, as we often do. And so it does that really, really well for us, and it manages our compliance training, and we can push things out and you get your notifications. And so all that's great. One of the challenges that I see as we start looking at what's next for us in an LMS perspective is we've got we're so dependent on it. All of our shop floor systems integrate with it. They have to check and make sure you've got your certifications done and things like that. So it's really going to be trying to figure out an ecosystem for the future from an LMS perspective, and how do we decouple a system and figure out what to do with that data. We don't have a true LRS, so really trying to figure out what's next for us and how do we pull it all together and have something that, seamless integration, the user experience is there. So
okay, great. One last question before Danny sums up. And this one to me, I think, is the most telling. This is where I found the most clarity about this question. But Mike, let's start with you again. How do you and your team use these two products, right? So what are, say, the top 3 things that you do on a daily, weekly basis with each of these things?
Yeah, from an LMS side, not really a whole lot has changed, I think, from our previous use of learning management systems. We use it primarily for hosting our internal content. So whether that's been developed by our internal teams or maybe we've worked with a vendor to custom build content, but it is the hosting platform for our internal AmerisourceBergen content. I think the second thing that we use it for is reporting and compliance and regulatory. And the third thing that we use it for is our audience segmentation. So within our business and all the different sub-businesses and subgroups, we've built a lot of dynamic assignments, of course, in LearnUpon, and there's a lot of audience segmentation. And really, we rely on the data within LearnUpon to build those out. From an LXP side, we use it for experiential learning. And so we're really very intentional about bringing in and surfacing a lot of these opportunities that are a little bit new to our organization. We also use it for skill data. I love the fact that skill data is front and center the first time that you log in. Really, a user can't even get around it easily. I think, and I think making that a key component, that is our common currency across all of our processes. So we're using it to start to mine some of these skill data. And one of the interesting points, we haven't really done a big push on skills yet. It's still relatively new. We found out last week in our EBR that we have 42,000 skill ratings already, and that's all just happened organically. And I think it speaks to how the skills are so prevalent. And I think the other thing we do is we surface opportunities. And so we're using it to bring opportunities to life. We're using it to allow people to explore beyond at the course level, but to explore development plans and career paths and roles, with skills aligned to them, and do some of that kind of fit of your skill set to a role plan or to a role requirement from a skill standpoint. So I think those are the top three things we're using our Degreed platform for.
Okay. And Michelle, how about you?
Yeah, and very similar, and really, what I like to talk about, really the difference between training, that job readiness, and then learning, and really that LMS, mandatory compliance training, that's really the main thing. So we use it for, we use it, it's our source of record for all of the audits that we go through, and it's all got to be there and be ready. So it's really reporting and that compliance. And if you think about anything that needs to be managed, we would put in our LMS, right? And it seems kind of intuitive and simple, but oftentimes we get asked to put things in our LMS that we don't need to manage it. Do you really need to track that? Do you really need to make sure someone actually completed it? And so it's really the things that are needed to manage and be able to prove that someone took something. And then from, an LXP perspective, we create the pathways, and it's really about, we haven't gotten into the skills as much as we'd like to, but it's really the pathways and accessing that external content. Our CIO, actually, I was meeting with someone in our IT team when I was prepping to do this, and he said, she gave all of our IT team 40 hours of, learning time to do some Degreed pathways. And they even have a competition going with our IT leadership team to see who can, get through them, and then they talk about what they've learned. And so they're doing a little friendly competition. So it's really just getting that skills development and really thinking about how we, move forward from that perspective, and I'm really excited to partner to even utilize it even more.
Fantastic. Thank you both. Danny, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Maybe you can sort of help connect some of these dots and turn up the contrast level a little bit for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Todd. So, maybe start by zooming out quite a bit here and really thinking about what's the purpose of L&D, right? What is our goal? And I would summarize that by saying, it is to enable our organization with the capabilities they need in the right roles at the right time, so the business can perform the work that they need to do. Right? That's our goal. And then when I was on the practitioner side, I thought often about what would the nirvana look like for being able to do that. And I thought often about this environment, this ecosystem where the skills that the organization need were being identified continuously, and employees would organically develop these skills, in a continuous manner, without the intervention of L&D, right? L&D's goal would be to set the conditions, to make sure those environments had all the tools, the resources, the assets, and to nurture that environment. That is sort of a nirvana state, but as we all know, reality is a bit different, right? For a lot of organizations, if you don't require your employees to build capabilities and skills, they might not build them. And that brought us back into this sort of systems approach for solving this problem, right? The LMS, that system is a transactional system that's focused on a lot of the things that were just talked about, which is, setting an audience, assigning courses, and then reporting that they've completed those courses. Important, but I think what we're starting to realize, right, as we look into the present and into the future, that's not going to be sustainable, right? L&D can't take a transactional approach to meeting all of these changing needs that our business has with their capability requirements and so on and so forth. And we probably all realize that a course completion is not the most effective way for employees to build skills. So that sort of leads us into really this ecosystem approach. And to use an example of some of the things I think that we're looking towards, where a transactional system approach doesn't work. I'll use a topic that's probably on a lot of organizations' mind: the Great Resignation. Right? What's L&D's role in the Great Resignation? We spend a lot of effort and time providing skills in training, and we don't want them coming out the other side of the bucket and leading the organization. So then we got to bring on new hires and new onboarding. There's sort of a goal to address that, and I think the way that's manifested for L&D is in career development, right? If we can provide the ability, as we're upskilling employees, to connect them to internal opportunities, we don't lose those skills. They don't exit the organization. But when you think about solving something like career development, it's a bit more non-transactional. You're really dealing with multiple systems that need to interact together, multiple different types of objects, data sets. You're having to connect your learning assets to skills to job opportunities. You have to get the business to input the types of skills they need for these different opportunities. And you need to provide an experience for employees that connects all the dots and takes them on this journey of building skills into these different opportunities. That's where you begin to exit the system approach and really enter the world of the learning ecosystem, right? And so, as with a lot of things, learning system versus ecosystem, the answer is somewhere in the middle, right? I don't think we will always need those transactions. We will always need to assign learning. Nobody's going to take compliance, without getting a little bit of push in those types of things. But for, as we look at the future and we look at things like digital transformation, trying to change culture, the career development use cases and these other use cases, I think we come to this realization that we need to take an ecosystem approach that is connecting, these different systems, connecting people to these different objects and data sets in one cohesive experience. And so that's a bit more, when you start going down that ecosystem track and sort of, leading into the activity, that's sort of where we landed is, so how do you make sense of all this, system versus ecosystem? And I think it begins with starting to think about the problems you're trying to solve. And as you diagnose those problems and you're thinking, is this a multiple system approach? What's the data? What are the objects needed? You begin to back into sort of the solutions that are needed, whether you're looking at sort of an ecosystem play or a systems approach. And so I think that's sort of, I'll hand it back over to Todd to talk to the activity, but trying to connect it back to that.
Well, before we move into the activity, Danny,
Yep.
Here's a bunch of use cases that we hear that are very common, right?
Yep.
Maybe you can just take one of these as an example and walk people through what you mean by ecosystem, because it's a word that we use a lot. And I think it's another word that's kind of like culture in that everybody uses it, but we're not necessarily always talking about the same thing. So when you say an ecosystem of things to solve one of these problems, what are the things?
Yeah, and I'll kind of revisit that career development, but maybe just to add a little bit of color to an ecosystem and what that really means, right? If you can look at the definition of an ecosystem, and it's the interactions of multiple systems in a complex ecosystem. But what I like to say, it's when you've reached this point of sort of a self-sustaining environment. So that whole idea that I talked about, where L&D, when you have a healthy ecosystem, I think L&D can take their hands off, and you can watch upskilling take place. You can watch the skills the business need be surfaced in this ecosystem. You can see, managers directing their employees to those skills. That's what you start seeing in a healthy ecosystem, right? In a system, it's a bit more of, if your hands aren't on there, using it and doing something with it, nothing's happening, right? And I think the goal is to create that more ecosystem environment. And career development's a great use case for that, because you have, yes, you need learning systems in there. You need sort of your job, systems, your opportunity systems in there. You need your skills taxonomies in there. You need all of those things connected together to bring that use case alive, so people can, employees can see the value of interacting in that ecosystem and understand how to navigate it. That's sort of what I mean by, more of a complex ecosystem that connects.
So it's data, it's technology, it's content, it's people, it's experiences, it's all those things.
All of those things, yes, interacting under a single sort of environment on sort of a continuous basis, a self-sustaining sort of nature. And so you think about those use cases, when you look at these use cases that you can't mandate a lot of things, right? You can't mandate career development. You can't mandate certain upskilling, some cultural transformational types of initiatives. The organization has to sort of organically buy into those things, and so you have to cultivate that with an ecosystem approach versus a system-oriented approach.